Okay, well, I would like to call the meeting to order. Yes, Jake, do you have the roll? I think we'll just go around the table and introduce each other. I think we have others, Alder Moore is up there, and Alexis Cecil, who's one of the project team. Right? So do you want to?
Approval of the minutes, Mary, if we can.
Oh, okay, and then we'll do that.
Yep.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
I'll move.
Is there a second? Is there any changes or additions?
It's for the last two meetings. That's like.
Are they? I'm not looking
Yes,
at it.
for the
so
last two.
I haven't had a chance to open them. Any corrections or additions for either of those sets of minutes? And then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. I think we'll move on to introductions. So if you want to just. What?
Appearances.
I didn't have appearances on here, so I'm not.
Oh, it's on here.
On the city.
Oh, I didn't get the city. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I guess we can do appearances. Does anyone want to make an appearance? Do you have a,
Well, just Rich Bernstein's on if he wants to.
Rick, were you planning on making an appearance or are you just here to listen?
Just here to listen.
Okay. All right, now we will go around and introduce each other. I'm Mary O'Connor, I'm the mayor. Alexis, I've not met you, but I've met the rest of your team. Rebecca, and I'm co-chair of this
I don't know
of the
that
steering committee. Oh, I said Alexis. That's hilarious.
Oh,
Anyway, okay, I needed it.
I'm Rebecca Hubris.
Hi, I'm Dan Williams from MSA. I'll be the project manager for MSA. And before Rain introduces herself, I'll let Alexis introduce herself since she's on the phone there.
Oh, yes. Hi, good evening. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Alexis Cecil, and I'm the historic architect with Quinn Evans.
Rain Gardner, project engineer, as well as kind of head up our Parks and Recreational professional group at MSA, and I'll be part of the project in and out as my position brings into the QC and the engineering side of things.
Hi, everyone. Kylie Beard. I'm a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation, as well as working at Ho-Chunk Community Medicine.
Marco Tucker, I'm the interim city administrator currently, and the finance director also from the city. I'm going to step outside, somebody's going to join. I'll say.
Hi, Wes Black. I'm a member of the steering committee and a vice president of the Friends organization.
and drummer for Slow Burn. That's just amazing. Go on Friday night.
Their single is coming out Friday.
Yes. Jake Anderson, Park and Rec Director.
And I am Marilee Gormans. We'll have to correct that on that. And well, we'll do it later. And I'm on the steering committee.
I'm Doug Wood. I'm an alder in the city.
Andy Kiplar, president of Friends of San Damiano.
Nancy?
Nancy Moore, alder on the steering committee and ex officio member of the Friends of San Damiano board.
All right, I guess we're going to turn this over to Dan and Rain and Alexis to kind of take us through the plan.
Okay. First, I think Jake needs to get us beer garden shirts. They're pretty awesome.
We'll have to do the new ones for the sign.
You have to work for them. Well, we could do that too. Well, thanks for coming together tonight and kicking the project off. It's an exciting project, I know, for you, and it is for us too. First thing I want to go over is roles and responsibilities. So as I mentioned before, I'll be project manager and team. Rain is like our team leader, so she'll be involved on the management portion of it. On the fourth page of what I handed out, again, is our team that was in our proposal. And they are the team that will be on the project. So it's, you won't see new faces to this team. But the faces that you will see, Brenda from Quinn Evans will be showing up a little bit late. And she's a cultural landscape architect and she works a lot with the Ho-Chunk Nation. So that's why we think it's important to have Quinn Evans on board. Also, Becky Benz on the top row there. Becky will be doing a lot of public engagement along with Dan Schmidt. Becky's a planner and Dan's a landscape architect. They do a lot of public engagement for us at MSA. So you'll see them a lot at meetings with neighborhood groups and focus groups, as well as any pop-up meetings that we want to have, like the beer garden on the 28th and things like that. Brian Hubris is a traffic engineer. He helped us on Violet Park. So with Monona Drive and the entrances into the site, he can help us with traffic flow and analyze that a little bit better, as well as vision triangles and those sorts of things that help you safely get in and out the site. Jeff Ellen is our environmental engineer. He'll help us with the lake shore and any wetlands that there might be on the site. And then, of course, Brittany Mitchell, she leads our funding team at MSA, which is kind of a specialty that MSA has. We actually have a group of people that seek funding opportunities for communities. So she'll help us out with any type of grants or funds that might be out there that could be put towards the project. So that's our team.
I would also note that Becky, Benz, myself and Brittany are the ones that have worked on the past search of applications with Jake on the overall site for the land acquisition portion. So we do have overlap between our teams and how we work with the funding side, and that's how we set up our projects, is that we're constantly having those discussions throughout the process to make sure that we're setting them up for the various funding sources that we know are available out there at the time.
And then, of course, you've just met Alexis, and she is a historic architect, and she will be coming to look at the house. Yet this summer, right, Alexis? We just got to figure a date and work with Jake on a good time to come.
Yep.
Just to give you a little background, Brenda is my wife, so I've worked with Quinn Evans for quite a long time now, so this is not a new teaming for MSA either. As far as the city, I don't know, Jake, you're the project manager for the projects. If you want to talk a little bit more about the roles on the city side.
Yeah, so what we would ask of this committee is if we have questions for MSA, just funnel them through me. Because we do have a contract that has time and billable hours, et cetera. And so we'll try to compile those, through me together and then bring them to our meetings. But that'd be the easiest way of just kind of having the flow of information go that way and back and vice versa. If there's something that needs to get to committee members, it'll come to me and I'll disperse it to all the committee members.
Okay, item 3, I just wanted to go over real quickly the tasks that we have in our contract. It was in our proposal, so that you understand the process and what we're trying to do with the master plan. So phase 1 we call foundation. So that's where we collect all the data that helps us formulate the concepts. So one of the things we'll do is a tree survey, similar to what we did with Violet Park. So I talked with Dan Schmidt, who's the landscape architect on our team. He did the tree survey for Violet. So he'll go out and measure the trees and take pictures, and it's pretty efficient what he does. And then we'll have the data put into GIS so that we can give that to the city for their use. We'll prepare site analysis, which will include hydrological maps, archaeological maps, soil slopes, those sorts of things, so that we get a good idea of the site, so that we're not designing something or planning for something in an appropriate location. And then, of course, Alexis and Brenda will be looking at the historic and restoration analysis of the house and also of the grounds. And different time periods from the Ho-Chunk to today. Task 1 and 2 is research. That's where we start to look at the requirements and documents. And when the city sent out the RFP, there was a list of documents that we downloaded. So we have a lot of documents. And if there's any additional ones, we'll be working with Jake to figure out what they are and where they're at. Historical and cultural significance, Brenda and Alexis look at, they go to the State Historic Society and they do a little research there to find out if there's any more information that we might not have at the city or say. And then Alexis will be reviewing the Grave and Isthmus report on the house as well to go back and look at the structural analysis of it. Task 1.3 is the public engagement. So this part in phase 1 is vision and goals. So this is where it's the opportunity to ask people, what would you like to see in the park? And so we would start to develop a list of desires that we can work off of for the concepts. And I'll talk a little bit about how we use that in concepts here in a minute. So then we'll have our first round of focus group meetings. Rain and I met with the mayor and Jake a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the focus groups. And what we did with Violet's Park was we had the neighborhood groups, we had adjacent business groups, and then we had individuals from minority neighborhoods. So we might want to break it down in groupings like that for this project, because before you know it, you'll have 12 groups. And it's hard to meet 12 individual times. So if we can start to identify groups and then put them in the same likeness groups, like neighborhood groups, business groups, and whatnot. So we'll be asking your help to develop a list of who those focus groups are that you would like to reach out to.
Question on it. I think we only met, you're looking for the contract, there's only 3 focus groups at the very, is that correct?
3 focus group meetings, so 3 rounds of meetings.
But how many groups? Okay.
Oh, yeah, when we met, we talked about it. It's best not to have more than 3 or 4 of those focus groups, because again, it gets to be too many meetings and trying to get too many people together at one time.
But each one will meet 3 times.
Each one will meet 3 times.
I wasn't clear on that initially.
So in this task 1.3 focus group meeting 1, say you have 3 subsets, that'll be round 1 meetings for those 3 subsets. And typically that can happen on a day or 2, because you can usually align meeting times up. That works for everyone to be on one day.
Are these focus groups intended to be the same group each time? Or
Yeah, so if you have a neighborhood, say it's adjacent neighborhoods as a group, they will stay together as a group through
they're signed up for 3 rounds?
And then they're signed up for 3 rounds. And there might be people that will drop out because they might lose interest, but with Violet, we didn't find too many. It was on the business side, and it was the hospital, because St. Mary's, it was the CEO, and he was too busy. That's what it boiled down to. But people will stay on board throughout the process.
What were the 3 again? Sorry, adjacent businesses, neighborhood,
and then lesser served communities.
Yeah, we'll have to think about that, because I would imagine we can get a lot of people just from Monona, who are going to want Monona, period, not just adjacent neighborhoods.
and I'm thinking stakeholders like Clean Lakes or different things like that.
Yeah.
Necessarily fit.
Yeah, and for Violet's, Clean Lakes was in with the adjacent business.
Oh,
So
okay.
like St. Mary's and Edgewood, and then Clean Lakes was in that group.
Okay.
And there was also a boating group, the Winker Boats.
Okay.
He used to have a rental in Violet's, but he was a business.
Yeah.
So he's included in that business group.
Gotcha.
Actually, I have a follow-up to that, Dan. So I would say that we have a significant number of potential community partners that would include everybody, like the list that we provided in the RFP, that would include everything from Aldo Leopold Nature Center to the Ho Chunk to One City Schools, our own school districts, and others. And I'm wondering where you would see those fitting in.
Maybe that's a group on its own. because it's like nonprofits and schools and that sorts of thing, which is not really the same as businesses, local businesses. So maybe you have a fourth group and it's made up of that mix of organizations.
Okay,
Are you recommending we try to keep it to 4 groups?
Yeah, I wouldn't go
Or-
past.
yeah. And what's in each group is debatable,
Yeah.
we can,
So we'll come up with a group. And then the general public in it for itself, that's the public information meeting. So that's where we have the open houses and where the people can come and participate. But the focus groups tend to be more like this meeting where you kind of drill down on what you're talking about, where the public information is more informational, but we do take responses from people, but more on a general level. Because it just gets unwieldy if we talk to each individual at a meeting. So then in task 1.4 will synthesize all that information from the first gathering point so that we can start to prepare goals and objectives and visions for the project. So that puts us into phase 2 is this concepting. So then we'll take all these different goals and visions that we hear from people, and we'll develop 3 concepts for the project. And what happens with these concepts is you'll see some things that people just don't like, and some people things they really like. That's so that it helps you determine that this is a no and this is a yes, because you don't want to have everything be directed in one way that everybody's like, oh yeah, we really like everything that's in here, but we really don't know how we want this to look because everything looks the same and we like it. But we also want to hear a negative. We want to make sure that there's something on the table that everyone agrees on that, no, this should not be in this side. And so the only reason I'm explaining that, a lot of people like yourselves understand that when we go to the general public with the concepts, you'll hear a lot of people say, I really don't like this, and they'll get upset about it. But that's a good thing, because that's telling us they don't like it and it shouldn't be there. So we're just pre-warning you that we'll hear a little pushback.
So do you think you can identify which one that's going to be before you get the feedback?
Probably, because you're probably be 50-50 where somebody wants something that's really highly active and it's going to be a big place. It's going to take a lot of space in place.
Yeah.
And then you'll have a good amount of people, 50% maybe will say, yeah, we really want that. And you might have 50% of people say, no, don't pave anything or don't tear something out to put this in.
Well, I'd say you're almost already seeing some of that in the
you're seeing it.
results,
What
from the survey.
So, but it'll shake itself out. They'll get, you'll get more percentage that'll lean one way eventually.
Right. Yeah.
And with Violet, it was Vilas Park Drive. Everyone wanted it closed down, but there was a fraction of people that didn't live in the neighborhood that wanted it left open. So at the beginning was kind of even and even. But at the end of the day, the more people looked at it, it was about 90% of the people that responded said, take Vilas Drive out. So don't have to go through. So that, you'll see things on the site that'll.
How do we, up to this part, to this point, how do we factor in, I guess, feedback from major philanthropic sources, since most of these improvements are going to need to be privately funded?
Again, you could add, I don't know that you'd want to have that be a group. With Violet, it was the businesses. They had people that could invest in the project.
They can be interjected in the focus groups, and be invited at that level, which I think is a good thing because they feel like they have a little bit more hands-on with the project, and that helps them want to donate at a later date if they have a little bit of input in the process and know upfront what it's starting to shape and the challenges we'll have to work through all the pieces that go into the plan. So I think that'd be something that they may be interjected in the various focus groups. And I don't know which ones until we shake out the list, but I think that'd be an excellent start to put them in one of those. those. You can identify, who some of those people are and we invite those individuals or groups.
And you have the outlier in this project, and that's the house. And which is a little different than what we typically see in park master plans, because they're usually just open spaces, and then people want park shelters that are new. But you have a historic house that somebody might want to do something with. So it might need to be, like Rain said, either interjected in groups or a group of its own.
Much feedback. Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, sorry. I'm just wondering also in terms of the general line of questioning for these focus groups, or for that matter, surveys. Do you put guardrails, if you will, around the ideas that are suggested, in that we already have guardrails by virtue of an easement that we've just signed with the county? And, we've talked about the 4 guardrails being the environmental, recreational, historical, and cultural roots of the property. And so, for instance, some of the suggestions that we've already seen, to build a boutique hotel there, as an example, wouldn't fit with what we've already signed off on, both with the county and with the stewardship fund. And so do you try to shape it a little bit in that way, but with a preamble, before you solicit ideas, again, creating some guardrails?
Yeah, you have to. And Violet's, they did as well, because budget, you can't, you have guidelines for the site. Like you just said, you can't build a hotel there because it's one of your guidelines. You don't want that. So you have to set those parameters. And I think that's appropriate to do that now in the project. So like Violet's, they had a budgetary constraints. They said, we are just not going to go down this road with aquatic center, for instance. They said, that's not even on the table. So don't put that in the survey. Don't ask that question. It's off, and I think it's good to do that. If you have parameters, establish them now. And then we'll work with Jake on the survey, the public survey, to make sure that we're not asking a question that's out of bounds for the project.
Yeah, one definitely parameter is, we accepted the money from the county, and that has restrictions and can't do land. And but I think that would be something you're probably already aware of that. But that certainly is going to limit, what we could do. Pay the money back.
Well, and I think that's important, though, that it's clearly stated at the beginning of meetings to preface the whole project, because otherwise the whole meeting can get derailed
Yeah.
by one person's thoughts and comments because of what they really want to see, that which can't even happen. So, yeah.
How much information data would we be looking to have before we hosted that first public information meeting? Kind of like ballpark timeline, your estimate.
We definitely want to have that first full public survey complete, so that we could show what direction it's all done.
Yeah.
And then by that time, we will have developed some site maps that people can look at and start to understand the environmental side of the project, which is important. You just can't go build things because there's things there like wetlands or whatever. And typically, we don't have public surveys open more than 2 weeks, usually 2 to 3 weeks. And just like the one that you just, the initial one, the first day or two, you got your big hit and it dies off. So, more than 2 weeks, it's gonna be 1 or 2 responses. Also, what we can do with the public, the bigger survey asking what likes and dislikes is we can have the QR code that we can have that posted on the board here at City Hall. We can put it on boards out in the park, and you just walk by with your phone and scan it. And so there's ways to get the word out other than emails or this website. We could have a pop-up table. We talked about the beer garden event last Friday, but we've got another one coming up on the 28th.
11th of August.
11th August. And then you have the fall, but the fall festival is kind of late in the season for the survey, so we might want to gear the next survey around the 11th. So that it's out there at the beer garden and all those people show up again.
National Night Out is the
The
night.
National Night Out that week would be a good week. Yeah.
That's what we
9th,
parked
11th.
here.
And I think that weekend we have food cart cinema, I think, is that Saturday, that week in August. Maybe it's the 20th.
Those are all great events though, to have. yeah,
Absolutely.
to have the QR codes out
Yeah.
there.
I would assume, Dan, I guess we didn't talk about this, but the focus groups, we want to have them before the public information meeting. It's usually good
Mhm.
for us to have that information ahead of time, knowing what we're walking into to help curb some of the conversation that's going to happen at the public meeting. Obviously, we will decide who's, right, as a group here, who's going to be in those focus groups that helps set some of the tone, and that goes into the public meeting too. So it's not all over the board on everything too.
What would you like to have done?
Good question, right?
Mhm.
Just looking at some of these
9th and
dates.
11th is
3 weeks?
I feel like the public information's gotta be in October, like, we gotta
Yeah.
try to push it back a little
Yeah.
bit into October, because the focus group creation, unless we're
That's gonna
deciding
take a while,
tonight
yeah.
and setting those meeting schedules up, and then a fuller
Yep.
length survey from your end and kind of the promotion is gonna take a little bit of time. That ideally we'd probably use that September timetable, maybe keep the initial survey through the August events.
Yeah.
Set up our focus groups in September and then kind of shoot for that October, sometime in October. So while the weather's, decent, but
One thing we could do too, because Jake set up the survey that's on Survey Monkey now, but you can add to it. And
Sure.
you can add, you could say, we're going to have a full survey that will be coming out in September or something on it. So that keeps people
engaged in
engaged.
it, yeah. And we haven't promoted it outside of at the event,
Hmm.
just to kind of, we need to email the people that have signed up for the tour of the house, and then just kind of through our general messaging system too. So I would anticipate we'll have 400 or 500 responses in the next,
Can you
week.
put that QR code on the newsletter?
Yeah,
The draft of that is floating around, so we need to get that.
yeah. Yes,
It's gonna be approved the next day or so. But we can also, we could do a citywide alert if we wanted to, or we could, send it to your,
yeah,
and to the libraries. They both have e-newsletters, that kind of.
So then Fall Festival is October.
October 15th.
The National Night Out was.
August 9th. August 9th.
And Mayor, can you relay what the plan is for August 11th? Besides a beer garden? I mean, I understand that there's been some discussion about a ribbon cutting or something like that.
Yeah, and that I don't know that much about it, but like a 15-minute thing, including ribbon cutting, right, Jake? I can't remember what you said in the email this morning.
Yeah, so ideally, the August 11th is this committee, if they can make it, our elected officials, the mayor will officially dedicate the property as a public park. During one of the intermissions, the song, we'll have the friends of with a big check, and it'll be kind of a celebratory nature, and kind of moving into the next stage of planning then, because there are some that like keep it as a park, like I still think there's some discussion about whether it's gonna be public park, public space, public property, or sold. So I think at that
Right.
date as a definitive, we're not moving into a planning phase as a public space.
Is that a resolution by the council?
No,
That it's a park.
no, we haven't had a resolution to the council about it.
So we've not passed it for that.
Nope. We only have one meeting before then, so.
I guess what I'm also wondering is what this group feels as it relates to the steering committee being able to review the survey. I mean, I understand that, you know, that Dan, you and Jake will do the bulk of the work, but I mean, it seems to me that one of the things that differentiates this project from other projects is that the city and the Friends very intentionally set up this steering committee to provide leadership, because it, as we've said all along, it can't just be a city of Monona Park. It needs to be in a sense, a Lake Monona destination and attract dollars interest, which it already has from outside of the city of Monona. And so, you know, we intentionally formed this partnership. So I'm wondering what this group feels about wanting to see the survey.
I mean, the responses.
No.
She's talking
No.
about the survey,
Question.
what's in the survey.
Yeah.
I think if we're gonna hold with a third Tuesday, we'd be looking at August 16th as our next scheduled meeting. If we feel that we can get enough of this initial, just kind of open-ended response survey in the next 2 weeks, and MSA can provide a draft available of those questions, that could be an agenda topic for the 16th to kind of approve those survey questions and have those ready to roll out, say, you know, September 1st through the 24th, basically, which would be kind of that last event that we're planning for the fall anyway. Might not be a bad timeline there. Have it open after Labor Day, the official kind of long length survey in tandem in September. We're working through focus group meetings. And then we may have to look at what our September meeting would look like before kind of the October. Does that kind of make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we back up a minute to Andy's point, actually, about it being a park and dedicating it as a park? Is it truly a park?
Well, the council has not voted on that because part of the thought was we were gonna be having this master planning process.
Right, so I don't, can we call it something else? I
So
think that,
Jake
I
can
don't think
force that
that
to
would
be
go over well.
But
I'm
at
all
this
for
point,
it.
it can't be anything but.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at a
But-
point where
but-
we.
Can't we just say it's a ribbon
If you're
cutting for
dedicating it
Sandon?
as a
Sure.
park, wouldn't you say this is such and such a park? And do we know that we're gonna keep the name for this park? So like,
Yeah.
what do we say? Like.
Well, what's the purpose of the ribbon cutting? I mean, it's as a kickoff.
Yeah, because we missed our other one. It got rained out and we didn't do it for the purchase. And I think the
Right.
purchase protection, if you want to mince words and call it public space, and that, you know, as mayor, I'll be championing dedicating this officially as a public park. Conclusion, master plan process. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's.
I
What
agree
it
that
is,
it's
right.
probably gonna
Right,
be a
and
park.
we have
and
to
not-
say we're
I
doing a
think-
ribbon cutting of a
Yeah.
park, can't we just say?
Yeah,
we're doing
that's fine.
A ribbon cutting
for-
of San Damiano, I mean.
I think just for
kick off
our negative
the process, whatever.
or, you know, some of the naysayers out there, you saying it's a park is,
I'm just gonna suggest maybe instead
Jumping
of
the
ribbon
gun.
cutting, maybe
Yeah,
it's more of a
ribbon.
celebration.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you've gotten to this point, that
yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
next step.
We're not, yeah, we're at the process, at the point of starting
The funds are
the
getting
master planning,
$150,000.
That's right.
right,
Well, I
Yep.
I think
for the process.
Well,
tying points around what this engagement process is going to be
Yeah.
would make a lot of sense. So if we have our schedule, our timeline, when the survey is gonna be out, we can
Yeah.
say this is, you know, these are the opportunities
Yeah.
that everyone's gonna have
Yeah.
to provide feedback. Those are the talking points, I think, make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I asked a question about the name. I asked the mayor, I said, is it gonna stay the same?
Not
And the response
necessarily.
is,
Actually-
yeah, not necessarily, but do we want to mire down the master planning process with a renaming process, because it'll throw a finger into
You don't want to.
But I think,
Yeah.
That's
I
why I
agree,
don't
but I
want
think
to
through it, you could probably ask, like, what's your
Yeah.
affinity to the name? Like,
Yeah.
What's your comfort level?
Yeah.
Because then at least we know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it should get bugged. But I think Wes makes a great point. I think we need talking points amongst ourselves, because I know even with the friends, we get the question about park or property, et cetera, and people are like, why do you keep calling it a property? Because it's a park. And it's like, well, long story, but. So anyways, I think having a unified set of talking points helps not only the city, people giving the tours, the friends group, kind of communicate that, because I think right now it's kind of all over the board.
And there's plenty of talking points to talk about.
Yeah.
And we've been saying all along. Hello. Oh.
This is Brenda.
Head of the table.
Grab it.
Or down
That
there.
We've been telling people all along that we'd like to get their input. So I think for us to just, like Rebecca said, leap in and dedicate it as a park, when we've barely gotten people
Yeah, I
a
think.
chance,
I mean, I think the
I
question-
guess we'd all like to
I think
keep
it's
it
just
park, and I
jumping
know
ahead.
that's what you'd like to do, Andrew, but I think.
Well, I just think the question is, once you sign that with Dane County, what's your talking points after that? Because what can you do aside from the park? Right? I mean, you sign
Yeah.
that, it's a park. So, I mean, you can't get the money back from your contract.
It's not called
So-
a park in the Dane County.
Well,
I'm just saying,
Greenville.
conservation space.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's what you call it. or
Right.
something.
Yeah,
I guess my
There's-
point
there's
is,
gotta be
it's not
some
gonna be
other type
developed.
of-
Yeah.
introduction we can make of it before we actually
Yeah.
have it.
Anyway, let's go on, that's the,
Okay, so then, where was task 2.2, the community engagement. So then that's when we come back, that's the round 2 of the focus group meetings. And then the public information meeting, where we present the concepts and get some feedback. And then task 2.3 is this committee and city engagement. So if we need to start any level of city discussions, we can start. Present to council or whatever needs to occur at that time. Phase 3 is the master plan. So this is where we get develop a comprehensive plan from all the positives that we've heard from the communities. So we'll draft a physical plan that you can see on overlay in the conservation area. And we'll start to draft the master plan report that goes along with it. And so one of the things that I want to point out, the way that we set up these phases is the way that we prepare the document. That makes us easy. So as we go along through these phasings, we're collecting data and we're putting it down. And we're keeping those notes and we're developing the storyline for the master plan. So at the end of the day, the report will be analysis and goals and objectives. And then move into ideal generation and then the final master plan and how you got there. Task 3.3, Brittany will start putting together a funding matrix of all the opportunities that might be out there for the site. And then at that time, it'll give us some time to respond to it and go to like entrepreneurs or people that from outside that might want to fund into it that we put into that matrix. Task 3.4 is a preliminary cost estimate. So at this time, we'll start to generate some idea of cost. We won't do that at the concepting phase because there'd just be too many things that'll get thrown out that it'd be a waste of time to cost them at this point. But we'll put together a preliminary cost estimate so that in this draft master plan, if there are some items that become cost sensitive, then we can start to identify it at that time. But it also help us start to develop a phasing plan for the project. So if there's some items, and they might be big ticket items, like the house, for instance, if it stays throughout the process, then we can start to develop a phase. What phases that come in? Task 3.5 is community engagement. So this is the round 3 for the focus groups and the public information. So we'll present the draft master plan and a budget to the level that you want us to discuss with the general public. And then task 3.6 is again committees and city engagement. So if there's any workshops or meetings we need to have with city officials, we can do it at that time. Task 3.7 is the final master plan and report. So this will be like a 90% document. You'll still have one more chance to add some edits to it. So we'll have a project team meeting and discuss any comments that you might have. So you'll have a PDF copy prior to the meeting so that you can have comments ready to go. Task 3.8 is the final community presentation. So that's, it would be a city council meeting probably, and then a public information meeting. Task 3.9 is the final edits. So there'll be edits from council and committees. And then that'll be the wrap up of the project. So the next line, the next item is the tentative schedule. So we're still able to stick with the schedule that we included in the RFP. So it's this last page and printout here. So we're here in July and for phase one, this data collection, and we were carrying it through October. So Jake was good with what he's saying with the survey being in September, October. So we had allowed for that to kind of happen in that time period. And we're looking at the focus group meetings in September, August, September. So I think we're all in line with what we just talked about. Phase two would be November through February 2023. And that's the concepting phase. And then that allows us to start the final comprehensive master plan in March, so that we have a pretty about an 8 to 9 month period in 2023 to finish the document by a year, end of the year date that I'd like to see for the completion of the project.
So what we need here to take to the council, you know, our task here is to come up with a financially feasible master plan. What do we need to know at that presentation date in terms of financial feasibility?
At the very end, you mean?
Yep.
Well, I guess part of it's going to depend on the friends, because my understanding is you're doing the fundraising for whatever this is.
Right, that's kind of where I'm getting at. So if
Yeah.
we,
So
what level of, are we going in saying we've got a great plan and a big price tag and we're going to start working on it? Or do we want to go in and say we've got a plan with a price tag and we're confident we're going to know where do we need to be?
I think it's obviously going to be something that's going to happen in phases. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think throughout the process, it needs to be clear, you know, what the city is funding, if anything, and what the friends have to do, because I think that will change the scope and picture and idea of what happens on this property. I mean, obviously, there's realistic items that can and cannot happen, which I think would be no matter who gets the funding. But I just think it, you know, I think what that lends itself to is more involvement with the friends as far as what we believe our capacity and our ability and our bandwidth is able to do in this whole kind of process of planning that.
I think there's, when I look at, so where do you think 3.4, having that first preliminary budget, where do you think that falls on the timeline?
They'd probably say that would be around like June, about a year from now, June, July. Yeah, we 3.4 we would have before that round 3 of the public the focus groups, and tentative for that round 3 is mid-June. So we would need to be somewhere in the May.
Seems like if we're bringing a plan in December that includes some major renovation of the house, which will be very expensive. Serious progress, you know, fundraising between June and December.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Now, there is some grant money available for things like that. I mean, renovation of the house.
think we want a
Depending on what
really
we
solid
do with
financial
the house.
plan for how to do that.
Right.
Yeah, and not just have it.
Because I'll tell you frankly, the city does not have any money for a big project for this right now.
Right.
So,
And I think that's fine, as long as that's clear throughout the
Right.
process of, you know, that communication out to the public too,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
whatever we do is gonna be privately funded,
and I think
and that
that's,
might take time.
yeah.
But-
And I think we've been saying that, but I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And coming back to this first phase of the project, we need to also talk a little bit about what's allowable on the site, zoning wise, from the city's perspective. Because the house, if it becomes something, what's the limits on it? And can those limits be changed or modified to get to a desired finished use of the.
Do we know what it's zoned as?
I think it's residential.
Don't know.
I feel like it's residential.
Yeah, I don't.
I feel
have
like
no
it is
idea.
too, but some of that area
Or
is commercial.
institutional, isn't it? Is that?
That could be
Institutional
too.
or churches, yeah.
But that's not really gonna
That's
be
not the
what
biggest problem.
restriction.
I don't
Yeah.
think so.
Well, I think maybe what you're alluding to is kind of city process that it might have, because you'd have to go through
Yeah.
zoning, and then even like landmarks commission, how does that play
We don't
in?
have any
So-
zoning.
Well, no, not zoning, but I just
House.
mean with the house and, you know, it's a, you know, a landmark and how that puts it, so that'll take some time.
But in terms of like what the building of the house, if we keep it, could be used for, I mean, it is limited to other basically uses that already exist in other public parks, either in Monona or Dane County.
Okay.
So
Which,
that's in the conservation.
when you start thinking about it, is a pretty wide variety of.
It is.
One of our alders even pointed out that the motor speedway in Sun Prairie is in a park. So, you know.
Probably not doing that.
This can't be actually.
They sell hot dogs.
And the golf course,
Yeah,
golf courses.
right,
It's our
so,
parks, that's
yeah,
true.
there's a lot of,
Right.
but obviously, we're not gonna build a condo there. You know, so that's. So that, and then, of course, there's also the limitations of just being on a historic property with a lot of Native American artifacts and whatever, and, you know, what's what we find there, so. A lot of different constrictions. It's
Where are we on the archaeological
not very
survey?
impressive. He hasn't really finished it that I know of. Then he went in the hospital for surgery, and he and Bill Beckenbush, he said they don't want to do this, the radar thing, right? But
ground
Jake,
bending.
maybe you can explain that a little more.
The archaeological report has not been submitted to the city. We've not gotten a status.
At this point, it's
on
mainly
the-
a paper thing. I
On
think.
the final of it, I think when we get to a more finished concept plan or master plan, that would be the appropriate time to kind of bring in some of the radar equipment, but
But
for
when,
all intents and purposes, you know, a large part of it is in an uncatalogued burial mound.
Mhm.
And that they don't believe in digging up multiple spots at the beginning. It would be more at the end, and then when you'd have a construction project ready to go, that's when you'd have your archaeological person on site during the digging and have your permits for the historical
but when you do
society.
like the project initiation of the archaeological map, how do you do an archaeological map if you don't know what's there?
I know.
I mean, you already have to do a soils report too, so
Yeah, that may be part of that.
I don't know how they do archaeological
Well,
without radar.
it was it the archaeologist that said that Bill shouldn't do it? Or did
No,
Bill
I think
say
he
that
just said it wasn't, he didn't feel in his mind it was needed at this time
Yeah,
until
I
we
think
got
it
further.
came
Yeah,
from
I
the
think they both
archaeologist.
agreed that
They were both there.
they both
Yeah.
agreed they didn't want to do it right now.
Yeah, I think that my understanding from John and Bill is that they're saying that traditionally an archaeological survey would be to stick a shovel in the ground on a grid-like basis and go across virtually the whole property, sticking a shovel in the ground, like, let's say, in 10 by 10 squares or something like that. And see what they find. And what they were saying is that that's no longer what they recommend or what they do, because they Bill feels like that disturbs the site more than Mother Nature or any potential burials more than they would want. And so their thinking now is less is more in terms of what used to be the traditional survey methods.
Well, and I don't think they've ever intended to do that. They've told us from the beginning that they're not going to dig. And the state historical people have told them they don't want them to dig also, but they were going to do this ground penetrating radar survey of part, at least part of the property, and just recently have decided not to do that. So, but I do know that the archaeologist has done a lot of, well, at least he said he was doing a lot of paper research, but I'm not sure when he's gonna be. Mark, you haven't heard anything about that report, have you? And I know he has a fairly serious surgery in July.
Did you want for violence?
Yeah, if you want to.
But Violence
Done a
was,
report?
Violence was different because it had already, the site had been mapped back in the 1800s.
Yeah,
Prior to the houses and all being built.
right.
Well, this has too. I mean, this is in the original 1836 or something survey.
I'd encourage you to just meet with.
The mounds,
SHPO.
I think Dan's talking
Oh,
about the mounds
mounds,
right.
documented by Charles Brown and.
Right.
Brown didn't come over.
I mean, he did,
And
he
Lamb
did a
didn't
lot
come
of
over
the
here.
Monona area, but I don't know if he did a
This
lot.
particular
up
site, we
here.
haven't found any, we could touch base with the former state archaeologist and see.
I would encourage you to just meet with Preservation Office. Or, I mean, I've had, the discussions I've had are not exactly the same as what I'm hearing. So I
Okay.
think let's just get in a room, and I think Bill too. I mean, you know, we're all know each other, so let's, I think, just, and I think understanding the process too, and let's,
Is that the woman, is her name Cheryl?
Amy Roseborough.
Yeah, Amy
Amy
Roseborough.
Roseborough.
That's who Nancy's heard.
Diana Vincunis, like, they're all there, ready to
Right.
have a discussion.
I think it's important to have up front, just like a soils and flood map, like
Yeah.
to know what is there, where we can build, if we're gonna build,
I would think so too.
you're gonna pave, where you can pave, all of that. You're gonna put in a parking lot.
Was the archaeologist, a state archaeologist?
John Hodgman, he's a private
He's a consultant.
consultant.
Amy
He's
Amy
done a lot of work
Roseborough
around
is
here.
the state archaeologist.
I'm sorry, what?
Amy Rose.
Amy is the
Right.
state archaeologist.
Right, but John Hodgman is the person who hired her.
Okay, and so you guys have a contract with him?
I think we do, don't we, Mark? Yeah. It's not a
Yes.
huge, I mean, we had an agreement with him for over a year now about doing it, but he was delayed, he was for various reasons, he has been working with Bill on it. I mean, they've connected on it to talk about it. And
If he was willing, we could, if he could share the material that he's found, we could at least look at that, and that would be helpful in guiding the project, even if he doesn't have a.
Right. With Jake, when you contact him, you want to ask him about that. I'm not exactly sure where he is. We haven't gotten anything preliminary from
And
him.
if he's been sharing stuff with Bill, we could ask Bill too.
I will say that my discussions with Amy and with Bill and with John lead me to believe that there isn't much out there. I mean, this is an unsurveyed site.
Yeah.
And the file at WHS is pretty darn empty. I mean, Amy said she has shared everything she has already. So I just don't want to get anybody's hopes up that there's going to be a treasure trove of info that will tell us much.
Well, there may not be info, but I would be surprised if there isn't something, just because of the proximity to the Monona Mound. And some of the other Monona Mound, you know, the Rindell.
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that it was a site, but there might not be documentation.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's what they call it, an undocumented.
Yeah, and so then actually, Bill is one of our best resources then, because he can provide guidance for
Mhm.
for how to move forward. So we need to.
It'll help with the physical planning.
Yeah, right,
Give us guidance.
right.
Right. I mean, you might not need it before community engagement.
And the next item, initial project goals, so we've already started talking about the public survey, so start to think about draft questions. When we see more responses from the survey that's out there.
I guess unless anybody has suggestions at the moment that you guys know of or in passing and have discussed with people that you like, hey, I want to know more from other people about this particular area or something like that. You can start crafting the questions around that then too.
Okay, you need to move the mouse or something. All right, thank you. Zoom.
So if anybody thinks of any questions, I mean, you can certainly share them now or send them to Jake. And I can send them on.
Do we really want to dig into that now? I mean, I at least have two.
I think so. I think it's worth the time to talk about, yeah.
I mean, one, we mentioned kind of the significance of the name, I think is the general question eventually that we'll want to get. And I also think, if the survey initial one is a little bit more general, I don't know how to word it, but what is the significance of this property, or what is your draw to it? Is it the house or is it the land? And figuring out that kind of equation in it.
I really liked the age range of your survey. Seriously, because if you look at the percentages, most of them are our age.
They were.
Well, I also
I
think
was
it's the
surprised by
event,
that,
though,
yeah.
right?
Well, right, but there was,
Was using smartphones.
75 people there, so that's a good chunk of people. So I think that's important to know the age range of people in Monona, because a lot of people have aged out of Monona.
Or Monona, Madison.
Right, but the people from the 1930s have kind of moved on. And new families have moved into Monona, so I think it's important to. I don't know where I was going.
Yeah,
with this, but
demographic data
I think
is-
the demographics have
is-
changed, and so the importance of the property may not be what we think it is.
True.
I think one thing for Quinn Evans or Brenda is the Grave report that the very end discusses kind of the cost of renovation.
Mhm.
And this is a very consistent theme that comes up with people that are saying, what are you gonna do with the house?
Right.
And then like, well, just how much would it cost? Because that impacts maybe a recommendation or an opinion.
That cost is no longer valid.
Right, it's
That is
probably
far
much
from
more
valid
now.
anymore.
Well, I think the report was just, it was a broad, it was 3 to 6 million. So it's a pretty wide
I'm
swath
saying
of.
materials and labor have
Right.
gone up the
We,
roof.
we just talked to an architect about the public safety building this afternoon, and he said between January and July, prices have gone up another 20%.
And they won't hold prices more than 30 days.
But I think as part of that, the question is,
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
more, yeah.
purposeful
It's more, yeah.
reuse of the house at this price tag, do you say yay, save it, or nay? Because I think just saying save the property without having any sense of what it might cost to bring it
Right.
to. The other question that is, for us is, given the designation as a local landmark, does it give the same protections as a state or federal landmark when it comes to complying with ADA? And so I think those are two of the
You
bigger
have to comply
questions.
with 88 period.
Well, right, so that like bringing that up, so
Yeah.
no matter what happens, we'd have to bring that house up to a level of ADA that would potentially change the look of it.
Yeah.
So I think those are kind of some, like, part of those, as we talk up front, those are like, this is the deal with the house, so people are kind of familiar with, like, this is what we can do, would have to do. This is kind of like a fairly ballpark estimate of renovation. do you still want to like preserve it?
I would disagree, Jake, because I think that any ballpark we would come up with just is, I mean, it all depends on what we do with the house. And so it seems to me that one of the things that we talked about from the very beginning, including in the interview, was, with MSA and with all the architects, is the process being, more, what would people like to see on the property? And I think asking people how important the house is to them or not is a good question, but I would say asking what they want to do on the property, and then out of that, you get a building program, effectively, a property program. And then out of that, you decide, is the house the most cost-effective way to get to that building program, or is it not? Is it gonna deliver, the kinds of programming space or performing space or concession space or whatever we decide we want in a master plan, or is it not? But I think to be throwing out numbers on the house at this point, to me, it just doesn't make sense. That's dangerous, because I just think that it could be 5 years before we get there, 3 years before we get there.
I think
That would be,
the clarification, Nancy, is some of the feedback I've gotten is people would say, preserve the house because of the historical nature of the house, nothing to do with programming on the property, just in of itself, they're pro preservation of the house because of the historical significance. So I think some sort of question maybe around that about, is preservation based on historical significance worthy of keeping the property, or is a beneficial reuse of the house? Some question to
exactly.
that.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I was saying. I don't have a problem
But-
asking a question about how valuable people feel like the house, how much of a, value that people hold for the house because of its historical significance. But I just think we want to be careful with throwing out numbers.
Yeah, and this, with the cost too, there is so much funding that could be used for that. So we don't really know what a cost would be, regardless of what the report says. You can take that cost and multiply it by a percentage probably to get today's number, but then we might get, tax credits or something. Well, we can't get tax credits, but we can sell them.
Well, a lot of the assumptions in the survey are that it's, don't save the house if the taxpayers are gonna fund it. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
So,
I think the cost is leading the answer.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's been everything I've heard about this project and the site itself, that's always been the two tied together so closely. So when we obviously do a park master plan, set costs aside, let's figure out the use of the property, what people want to see. And then we start to hone in those costs. Obviously, we want to build an implementable plan that's feasible. But that is a piece that, I think we need to kind of uncouple at the moment until we get through kind of the first phase of public engagement, focus groups and things like that. Because I think it's going to really bog down the whole portion of it. And I think to the point of the questions, I think maybe what's coming out of this is that maybe you're not allowed to answer the question about the house until you get to go through it. Because I think that helps
Well, that's
people
true,
decide
yeah.
what's really going on with
Yeah.
it, because they see the outside, oh, super cool, and they think the history of it, but then when you go inside and you're like, how are you actually gonna do anything with it? So maybe that's part of it. I mean, we talked after, over the last few weeks, about the questions on the survey and how you maybe need to pay to play a little bit because, certain people are all at different points. And I think in order to answer the questions best about the property, you have to experience some of it, or have you been to the site? And then you get to start going down those questions. If you haven't, you get some of these questions for now until we can start to pull it all together. And it might encourage people to get to the site more and answer after they see things, because I think we're gonna get a lot of input that doesn't really make sense if they've never been to the site. We need to weed that out.
I really like that idea. I do.
Yeah, you can customize it with that.
Good luck, Dan.
No, we're gonna sell the stairway and the paneling in the hallway, because that's the only thing that really looks cool.
Fireplaces.
Fireplaces, yeah.
There's some fire-
Oh, yeah, the
Use all the
fireplaces. The rest of it.
Those fireplaces.
But that was the fear that when we were talking a couple of weeks ago was if people have this big push to make this house museum, for instance, it would be very expensive to recreate the house, but then you gotta maintain it once it's built,
Right.
and there's no money for that.
Right.
Just that, to me, that's one of those items that's off the table, because it's astronomical to have a house museum there.
I agree.
Yeah, just one reminder might be also to think about the house as an opportunity potentially, like if you, depending on what your the vision starts to be for the whole site, if you're deciding, someone else was talking about this a little bit ago, if you feel like you need support to facilitate the programming that you might be having on that site, and you decide you need buildings to support that, the existing structure may be an opportunity, and if you're going to spend money on new buildings and new construction for any purpose, you already have one that's there, and that's not necessarily always a higher cost than building new, depending on a lot of factors.
Yeah, it gets back to what are the goals, what are we trying to do, and then
Right.
evaluating it within that context.
Just gonna say it's a financial thing too. There's a carbon consideration here. So, and that's something that even if, I haven't been inside the house yet, but even if it's, there's a lot of unappealing bones in there. The embodied carbon sometimes is worth it to go through and make changes and reuse what you can reuse. So, and Alexis is really good.
Yeah, and it can, and it can be about the, is it a funding source and generation of funding, as time goes on, and it starts to become like payback, almost like payback period, of, I can make an investment, and then what's that return on that investment? Is that part of the conversation? But at the same, all in the other realm of things, it could also be, walking the site with the Ho-Chunk Nation and talking about that. And if the grand vision is to really restore and celebrate, or, have this site be, much more interpretive on that side, and there's a strong feeling that the house is in conflict with that, then maybe it doesn't fit with the overall story. So I think there's, like, at this point, as everyone is saying, there's so many different directions that it might, whether the house fits with the overall vision and story that we're trying to tell. Is it useful? Is it purposeful to that long-term vision? Can it be helpful? Is it an opportunity, or or is it something that's a barrier? So I think it can certainly be both.
Alexis, correct me if I say this wrong, but I think we frequently zone buildings so for different kinds of use. So when you were talking about meeting accessibility standards, even with public buildings, we frequently have zones that are not used by the public that can be not meeting all of the standards. So
Yeah, it's just a place.
yeah.
Jake's office.
And to step back just a minute, when you said zone, I just happen to think I'm pretty sure that it's a community design district, which allows for a lot of flexibility in what could be
It is. I
done with
looked it
it.
up.
Yeah.
I've got a question kind of about seasonal usage. It's just, we're not just, just from May till October. There's a lot of other times, and maybe some questions about, other times of the year and other seasons.
Like simply like how they get there. How they're transitioning.
Yes. Yeah, we talked about that.
It's huge.
So that'll be.
Yeah, especially for a large event like the beer garden.
Were there a lot of voters at Beer Garden?
No,
They didn't.
Where are you gonna dock?
Yeah, they don't really have.
Where are you gonna dock?
Oh, what do you call the bay?
Oh, yeah, Holy-
Holy Bay.
Holy Bay, yeah.
Jesus Beach, there can be 75 boats there on
Yeah.
a nice Saturday or
I think
Sunday.
at the beer garden, where they both say.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have any boats.
Who's got a boat? Let's
Well,
go.
Maybe they didn't.
Weather was stormy that day.
Oh, so that's a reason.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I just want to run down some dates for you guys and maybe kind of think about meeting dates and kind of goals and objectives for each of those. So we've got our initial survey that will be out and available, which is really just what was in your packet, open-ended, what's your vision for Sonnet? We'll keep continuing to promote that in lieu of having this more detailed survey.
And before you end on that, at the bottom of it though, can there be something stating there'll be more survey engagement
idea.
coming
Yep.
out? Because we talked about how the survey is gonna
Added to,
morph and change and.
And two additional
Yes.
survey questions will be added.
Sorry, one question I had that kind of loops into the survey dates and such. So as we do events kind of outside MSA coordination and such for input purposes, is there going to be a consistent survey or avenue for that type of input that doesn't necessarily fit within these timelines? Or are all of the surveys going to be kind of connected? So there's no survey date, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Because we're gonna keep people coming through the house at different times and such, and I would hate to say, well, wait until September for that next survey. And I don't know what questions that would be. That's just the question I had.
Yeah, I mean, I think having this one knowledge is that open-ended, what's your vision for?
And that's fine.
Now, I
That's the
think
answer.
we just
Yep.
push to that and get as much of that open-ended, and then we can sift through that
And
information.
it has the comment box on it.
But, right,
So
it's
people
just,
have been putting comments.
it's just the open-ended comment.
A lot of comments right now.
Do we want everyone who's taking this survey to retake, to do another survey?
And I was just gonna say, we
Because
probably
if
almost
we're-
have to track if they've taken it before and are providing new comments, because you hate to,
People are gonna do one and done. They're gonna say,
someone's
this
gonna
is
keep
my.
punching in something.
Right.
They're all, certain groups are also gonna keep taking it to get their opinion across.
I think once we have the main survey that's gonna be used as kind of the data set for that first public input, that probably should be a separate one, and to say, we've utilized a lot of the feedback from your comment over the last one. We're asking you now to take like 20 minutes to take, this, because this survey will be used in conjunction to kind of have these concepts available for this first public input. Surveying in Monona is like, people love to do, like, I'm not worried about getting information and data, like, they like to fill out surveys. We just get good responses, but the process of this more detailed one and the mailers, like, we're talking about reaching 5,000, the goal, right, is the 5,000. That's gonna be postcards and mailers. And what, your goal, my goal?
We came up with that number together.
It was hard.
I'm not gonna let you.
Hard.
know.
I don't think kids can take it, can they?
But anyway, I mean, kids could take, right? We
Because you
want
have to age group.
interaction. I mean, maybe that's different.
Is it a one and done, or like, do you have to enter your email and your email's already been used, or?
I think it's based on your
IP.
IP address.
So once your
it's
IP
a one and
address
done.
logs
That's
in,
one,
you can't
yeah.
take it again?
I mean, it would be nice to maybe collect email addresses through it too. I mean, this is kind of getting down a rabbit hole, but.
Well, the people that are taking this survey, we want them to know there's a more in-depth
Correct.
activity
Right.
coming. That's the key,
Yeah.
so that they don't think that was my.
Right, that was my one shot.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're,
And if you want, right now, the survey has, are you Monona resident or non-resident? You can drill that down and have certain amount of zip codes around this area, just put those zip codes in there or other. So like,
Yeah.
that's what we did with Violet. So we knew who was in the Dundas Monroe neighborhood, who was in the Violet neighborhood, and those percentages. So if you want to pick an area on the east side or some, and then have other for the rest. And in the other, there was just, it was a fraction. There were people in Arizona that took Arizona and Washington because they read the newspaper and they saw the survey, and they used to live in Madison.
Yeah. With plenty of people. Sorry.
I
So
have
it sounds like
a
that.
question.
What was that?
Sorry. I just have a question about what you keep referring to as a more detailed survey. So, and I say this as somebody who does a fair amount of surveying of a different kind, you miss 100% of the opportunity, 100% of the opportunities you can't see. And we've just talked about the fact that there's a very wide swath, very wide continuum, if you will, in terms of people's level of engagement with this property. And from the very beginning, one of the things that we've talked about is that, one of the things that makes this challenging is that this property doesn't have a natural constituency. This isn't where people have been hanging out on campus, like in the case of a university, or hanging out at a museum. And so they have an experience. I mean, most people haven't been on the property still. And never mind experienced it anyway. So I guess I'm wondering if, in terms of a more detailed survey, if it makes sense to posit a laundry list of ideas, if you will, where people, I often ask a question of, how important are the following things that this organization does to you? And then, it's, in my case, because I'm a conservationist, it's protecting land or restoring land or youth engagement, to build their appreciation for nature. And so people are able to react on a scale of, and so I'm just wondering if something like that makes more sense, so it's, access for largely silent watercraft, or a water taxi, or use of the historic house, or so rather than just kind of having a wide open, where there is because again, people's level of knowledge and experience on the property is very limited.
The thing with the more encompassing survey is we've got to be more direct with it, being that we can't ask too many comment questions because you get overwhelmed, you can't read up, you can't decipher all that material. So we're going to have to answer questions. And I think that's the route that you're going. We can have a list of items, for example. What are 20 items that could occur in the park, and list them from 1 to 20, which you would like the most, which you like the least, and vice versa. You can go, which do you not like? And then you can also do your questions, but list them as questions. How would you like to see the park used? Like conservation area, but have those answers be answers that they click a button on, so that, because the comments it'll be too unwieldy for us to go through all the comments. If we have just, how do you want to use the site, and in what manner do you want to use the house? We have to define what those answers are.
Exactly. That's what I was suggesting. I typically have if it's how important is it to you, to those 20 items, then it could be, the high importance, medium importance, low importance, no opinion,
Yeah, so that's what the next survey will be.
Yeah.
It'll be
Okay.
asking those further questions.
Okay, great. And so who gets to generate those 20? I guess that leads me to,
That's what we're going to review as a steering committee, right?
Yeah. That's what we talked about earlier.
okay,
So if you have questions that you want now, you would tell them, and they're gonna work that into a draft, and then that draft will be released to us before our next meeting.
I actually think the open-ended questions that we just sent out are a great starting point for
For suggestions.
different ideas.
Yeah, because there's comments being made.
Yeah.
And is that, there's just interviews in here as a step under, I mean, that could be another starting point.
Yeah.
Is that interviews with who?
So there are focus group.
No.
Oh, the interviews.
Above that.
Yeah, so that's typically people that you would identify as people that, like yourselves, this group.
So that could be a way to give Nancy a call. See what she thinks the options.
You know, Andy already gave us 2 questions to ask, you know, so.
I think if we
It's a
circle
guiding
back
group.
to the schedule, we'll get there, you guys, we're getting there. August 11th, Thursday, is our next public event at the property. That's gonna be the celebration of the kickoff of this planning process, the ribbon cutting,
make it as long?
photo op with the friends of during intermission. We got it all in 15 minutes because we gotta keep the music going. That's a Thursday, August 11th. Our next scheduled meeting, if we want to stick with the third Tuesday, would be August 16th. At that time, we'd have a draft, more in-depth survey, including feedback that we've gotten out of the open-ended survey from members of this committee. We would discuss it at that meeting, and that would probably be the topic to finalize, edit, narrate, whatever. And I think also at that time, we would want to maybe try to chunk off what that focus group category would look like, a draft from MSA on what those major groups would be, and then what the subset groups would look like.
You had a list in the RFP.
We did have a list, yes, of focus groups, but I think we probably want to reserve the right to.
Yeah, so we can start with that list.
Yeah,
and if
start
you
with
have
that
some
and-
Yeah, I
people
don't
to
know
add
if we
it.
gave a huge amount of thought to what was in there. It's the same thing with the community partners.
Yeah.
Brian and I just sat there one day and threw everything we could think in there. So not all of them would necessarily be.
Okay.
So we talked about Labor Day through the end of September, having that survey out, but we potentially could reserve that month of September for interviews, stakeholders, focus group meeting, first round with all those in September.
Mhm.
And then our September 20th meeting, I have question marks. Is kind of where we want to be at that meeting and what we want to get done. If maybe that's the meeting, we finalize the questions, have this first draft, but then have our interview stakeholders and see if we need to kind of revise anything with that. It just depends if you want to have that survey out in the month of September or the month of October, because we do have September 24th is going to be our last, at least for now, beer garden and last call for house tours. We'd like to kind of coordinate 2 Saturdays, the 10th and 17th of September, and have those public viewing of the interior of the house, with the last one being on the 24th. It is fairly time consuming for those of us that are leading those tours to kind of bring in multiple groups of people. We do have a video tour now available that's on the web, and we'll have it kind of on a special page. But at that point, I think is like, these are the times, the next 4 or 5 dates that you can come and tour the inside of the house in person. After that, we move on to kind of this survey, concept phase, what we may
Can I
be.
just say one thing too, in terms of those tours? I think if anybody's interested in helping lead some of those tours,
Yes.
let us know, because we could use some help. And Jake or someone from the Friends will give you some kind of just a basic introduction to what you should say, and it's not that involved. So
Jake, did you say the focus groups and the first public meeting would be in October or September?
Well, I think that's what we should probably talk about, because I'm looking at our September 20th meeting, what would we need to act on as a committee? And then we would have the 15th of October Fall Festival, and then a meeting that Tuesday after the 18th. So
Do the survey in September on the 20th, we could talk about the game plan for the focus groups. And public meeting, and do those in
how soon after the survey is closed and analyzed do you think we should have that public input meeting? I just worry that if we're really how many rounds of, are we talking about 1 round with focus groups before public input number 1?
One.
Okay. Is that doable? Do a public input meeting in October, and sometime between September 20th, have our focus groups contacted, identified, and meetings set up.
Well, are we at the August meeting, are we not confirming the focus groups then? Because that would give us more time in early September to schedule. I mean, we're gonna probably need the whole month to figure out the
Feel like
dates
it
for
could be
the.
a
focus
long
group.
discussion on the survey questions for August meeting.
Everybody has homework ahead of time.
Should probably just do both.
Yeah.
I need that.
So August,
The main thing about the focus group is we need to identify who, the focus group is a person for each representing, who is that person?
Right.
Was it, how many people are in a focus group to? Is that 15 to 20 or is it 5? Is it-
Usually 10 to 15.
Yeah, make it
That's pretty
large,
big, that's
and so
pretty big.
it's closer to maybe 5 to 10,
Yeah,
to
if
be
you can keep it
honest.
5 to 10, that'd be.
You have a
nice.
representative usually, or they send maybe 2 people, if they're a larger organization or group or something like that.
The
We don't need the whole
neighborhoods
group
tend-
to come.
Yeah, neighborhoods
But, yeah.
tend to send more than one individual. And sometimes they'll assign one individual and then 4 will show up because they're neighbors or something, they're friends. So it would be good to keep it to 5 to 10, but 10 to 15.
We don't have neighborhood associations
No.
for the most part, like
That's
Madison.
Providence.
So I almost wonder if they end up at the public meeting then. the
Yeah, if you
neighborhoods.
don't have neighborhood.
the non,
association.
well, I mean, like, the thing is, it's
There's
it's
neighborhoods,
Madison Neighborhood Association, so
Right.
how much credence are we gonna allow, you know, it's Lake Edge and the Buckeye, that section is
like
fairly
Atwood.
organized, actually, like
Yeah.
what Atwood. That I think, you know, we've already seen a lot of engagement out of that neighborhood.
Yeah.
That was probably the
Anybody
vast
that was
amount of
Blooming
people,
Grove at one time.
correct, that were there.
Is there enough interest in the people that live south to have somebody represent?
Along the border, I'm sure.
Oh, like Winona Way.
Yeah.
No,
No.
like, just like Jack Fadness, all
Yeah.
those people that live along the
Super.
border of the properties.
Oh, the property. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
along the lake. Because they're gonna have some interest in it, they're adjacent to it.
Right.
Oh, sure.
Right.
So I think that would be a good agenda topic, that's the August meeting, is come up with a
Who's gonna
draft
be-
focus group
yeah.
and subset and kind of
Who-
wade through that, that would be kind of in that, because your, you know, time is very valuable, and whether they belong in just the general public input or if it's one that we need from that organization or group.
Can you tell, Jay, can you tell what time the 11th we're on for?
It'll 6 o'clock,
Is that when it's starting?
6, yeah, it'll be a 6 to 8. We're probably looking at the first intermission, 30 minutes, 45 minutes after first starting. That was your
Well, are
intermission.
you playing again?
I don't think so. I wish. They weren't available this time.
What's the price?
Generally like 6:45, I think, Nancy, is when we try to
Do a program?
do a program for 15, 20 minutes. And still do kind of like what we
Okay.
did with the last one, house tours on the hour, 6, 7. Or 5, 6, 7.
Was this last one 5 days or was it just 6?
It was 5 day, but music starts at 6. So food and beverage sales start at 5.
So
house
will
tours
that
start
be
at
the
5.
case this time too? It starts
Yeah.
at 5? Because it's gonna be getting dark earlier too by that point, so.
Got all those nice
Not
lights.
that much,
Yeah,
but-
and August 11th, we'll be okay on August 11th.
Okay.
5 days,
So
yeah.
5 days.
5 days.
And then the August 16th meeting will be 5 to 7 again?
Yeah, or 5 to 6:30. I'm not gonna be here. Are you gonna be here on August 16th?
I can be there then, but the second Tuesdays are not gonna work for that point.
The third Tuesdays.
For, what is it?
Third Tuesday.
Tuesdays are not gonna work for me from that point forward, but I'll be there on the 16th.
Okay.
So you think we can have a draft set of questions based on some of the feedback, and committee members can email me and we'll try to do end of this week? Any must-have burning questions that you want? Or the end of next week and send that to you, because we probably want that. Ideally, we would have that draft, you know, the packet out by the 12th, if possible, for the meeting on the 16th.
So just to go back, just to be clear, to go back to the idea of we would have a, you know, list of 20 specific things to react to as opposed to open-ended question with this detailed survey. You want us to offer what might be those 20 items
Well, we might
as
suggest.
one potential survey question.
Just if there's any questions that you think is valued and appropriate, let us know what you think. You know, Andy gave us 2 already. And that's a significance of the name of the site. And then what is your draw to the site? So things like that. If there's something that you think it should be asked in the survey, let us know.
And I think she
Well,
said.
I guess, Dan, what I'm trying to get at is,
She uses.
For 20 items.
Homework and come up with 20 items.
No, you don't have to come up with 20 items. But if
no,
there
but
are,
I'm just saying that this group hasn't been asked its vision in any way or individually our ideas. And so I'm just wondering if we're supposed to be providing you with ideas that might be some of those 20, or
Yes.
are
Yeah.
you coming up with
Yes.
those 20?
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right.
It doesn't have to be
Okay.
20. It could be
Yeah,
2,
then-
1, 5.
Be 10.
Right. I mean, I'm just using
Yeah.
20 because I'm not saying there's gonna be 20, but I'm just saying, I just want to be clear what our task is. And I
Okay,
have to
next
say,
Friday.
I'm less interested in the name thing, but
You don't have to be.
You can check it out.
I will send you I think if you want to go deep dive to Violet's Park master planning process, there's some pretty good examples. And I think I sent you that link that has the survey, which has some of those.
Will you send it again though?
Yeah, I will send it again. That can maybe help stimulate questions that might be similar, or it'll be like, nah, I don't think we need that one, you know, anything simple like that. And then some of the responses I thought were interesting, because you always get like, and the comments like, well, you should have asked this question, or why isn't that category on there? Of course I do wind kite surfing, you know, like that should be on there, or disc golf, or whatever it may be. I thought it was pretty helpful actually in how we might want to frame some of the questions we have for Sandom. So I think if we can probably shoot by next Friday, would be August 20 or July 29th. That would give you guys enough time the week of, or does that give you enough time to
July
take that
29th.
information and have a draft to us by the 12th? That we
Make it
can,
happen.
that we put in the packet.
Is the survey you have out there now be pretty done?
I would, yeah, well,
It hasn't
we
really been
haven't
promoted
pushed it
anywhere.
hard yet, and so that'll happen this week.
Okay.
And we don't have an event at the Dom until the 11th. So it'll just be all, you know, digital.
Yeah.
From
I'm wondering,
MSA's perspective.
could we say have your potential survey questions back to like the 27th? Maybe people really need. So that's true, right? I mean,
27th,
like
tomorrow, whatever you want.
for me, if I don't come up with a.
Yeah, it's gonna be fresh on your.
Jake, on the current survey, you will add something about
Yes.
more detailed survey.
Yep, I will edit it, and then, because then we can push out
Yeah,
like with those edits.
and be sure you get it to Will and Anita for the newsletter.
Question for the MSA group, do you want us to push that survey, or should we save our powder for the real survey?
Save the powder for the real survey.
That's right.
This is giving, just reading the comments again, I mean, it gives us a lot of good ideas to put in and interject into the list of potential activities. We already talked about a few. We have a list of really good questions too that we've already developed. So I think I'd really like people to hone in on those, because that's gonna give us some pretty clear directions at these junctures that we're challenged with as a group here that we're having a good conversation about.
Or we could just keep the QR code up on
I was
the
gonna
site.
say, yeah, maybe that can just be.
And then if you're there, you
Yeah.
can passive
Yeah.
for now. Yeah.
People will just be like, what is this?
then they'll take it.
I mean, free prizes. No, we did tell you the truth.
Right, we want to hammer out to get as many responses.
Yeah.
These ones are fun.
I have two other questions on, related to the schedule. I'm still unclear. It was just brought up. I'm still unclear as to who the interviews are gonna be with. And is that something we need to be thinking about sooner rather than later?
The interviews are pretty much this group or any people more on the official side, like city officials. Or
Maybe members of the Friends Board.
yeah, that are more directly related to the project.
Okay. And so is that to say, Dan, that you, as part of this contract, you're gonna be interviewing everyone in this group and everyone on the Friends Board and then whoever the Sunny identifies, or was there a number of interviews that you are coming to?
The interviews, what you're doing with the providing us feedback on what to ask, that's in a sense an interview. So what we're doing, the exercise that we're going to go through with you providing us some questions to ask is, in a sense, we're interviewing you. We're wanting to know what the vision from your perspective is for the park. So it can we have to have a sounding board to ask the general questions to the public. And by doing that, we have to interview you, but you're going to provide us your thoughts on what, as this group, you have your goals as the Friends. You've established your goals for the site. The city has their goals for the site. So what we need to know is basically what are those goals to get the ball rolling so that we ask the appropriate questions to the general public. And that goes back to, there are some things that are going to be off the table to begin with, and we don't want to go down that road. So the interview is asking you what the baseline is for the beginning of the discussion for the public input.
So would we be able to have you, or just one of you at a Friends Board, or like our next Friends Board meeting, just to facilitate that?
Well, so that makes this deadline on the 29th a little bit different in my mind. It's not just questions, it's like, that's an opportunity for each of us to provide direct feedback. And in terms of vision and thinking and, okay.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things that I'm struggling with a little bit, Dan and company, which is to say that it seems like this group sharing more either individually or collectively our vision, which is a little bit different than goals, I think, would be important. I mean, that's why this leadership team was put together. And
no, you're right, and that's what we want to accomplish by the interviews. So like with Violet's Park, the interviews were with a particular neighborhood because they were very vocal. So we wanted to kind of ease that situation. We talked with city staff, the Parks Division, because they have maintenance that they have to care for. And then we didn't have a Friends group, but I would say that the neighborhoods in that case would be like a Friends group because they were vested in the park because it's been there for over 100 years. So it's the groups that are, you're directing the project, you're our client. So that's the interviews. It's with city people and it's with the Friends group. And if there's any other group or person that you think should be in that conversation, we should interview them. Or talk with them.
I guess I feel like I've heard two different things. I feel like I've heard you're going to interview us, and then I've also heard if we give you questions, that will be our interview.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about that too.
Well,
I think it's an interview. We're having a discussion.
we're having it.
Well, and the questions
It's
are for the
not-
survey,
Right.
Yeah, the questions are.
so those are separate.
That's different than the
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah, so
So they're all happening.
Because
Yeah.
when we talk,
They're not the same.
if we,
Just
when-
kind of the impression.
so when we come to the Friends meeting, we'll have a general discussion. And we'll hear your thoughts and what the Friends feels about the property. But that's gonna be way more information than the questions that we're gonna ask the general public. You're gonna give us some baseline for our concepting on the direction that you would like to see the design go, or the plan go. Asking questions is what we want to get from the public. And we
Right.
want your help to form those questions to ask the public.
That's what I initially thought, but then the way you're explaining the interviews are the questions, or what, however you put it, that's what was confusing. It's two separate things.
It's two separate things, yeah.
And so I guess, I hear, Dan, what you're saying about getting together with the Friends group to have that conversation. Let's call it a visioning session, if you will, for the Friends group. When are we gonna do that for this group, is my question. Or are you gonna be doing that by having separate individual interviews with each of us? I'm still unclear about that.
We won't have separate individual interviews with separate people on committees or on groups like the Friends group. We'll have an interview or a meeting with the Friends group.
I think her question is, when are you gonna have
About
that
this.
conversation with this?
Yeah.
This group, so then that's
Yeah.
what we're getting back to the August 16th steering committee meeting. We'll have the draft survey, which is the questions we want to ask the general public. But those will also be based on, they'll have some directive to them, based on what we're hearing when we meet with the Friends group. Forget the date you just told me. Because that's prior to the next steering committee meeting.
So Dan,
I
I think
think-
maybe your agenda for the next steering committee meeting, you want to include a visioning session. So it's the.
Yeah, and we had,
We did share the minutes from that session that we had as a group with the consultant back in November, when we did talk about people's visions for the property as well. I think Jim
yeah. and
shared that with
and
you, right?
You sent us a copy of that too. So we do have a basis.
Yeah,
Um,
and that was everyone in this group. There were two people missing, actually.
Yeah, but I guess my own view is that first of all, it seems like 3 years ago.
Well, I'm just saying that's another piece of the puzzle. I'm not saying that's the whole
Yeah.
visioning process
Yeah.
from this group. I'm just saying it's
Yeah,
something.
yeah. I mean,
it's
I guess I'm
something
just feeling
to
still a
start with.
little confused because again, if the agenda for August 16th is, I understand it, is to react to a draft of the in-depth survey for which we're going to provide questions, including, very specific ideas. And also to focus on who the focus groups will be. Then I still feel like there isn't clarity around when is this group going to have a visioning session? Because the questions that I might ask the public is very different than what I might share as a vision. And I would imagine that would be true for a lot of people around this table. That makes sense?
I hear you, Nancy. Can we add visioning to that agenda?
To that agenda, because if we meet
big
with
agenda.
the Friends beforehand, there'll be half of the group.
Is it wise for this committee to have visioning before we get feedback from the general public?
Yeah.
I do
That's-
not believe so.
I think
I
that's
tend to
the
agree with
purpose of
that.
this,
Yeah, that
is
we're
to-
taking the community's input and that's
Right.
what is,
Yeah, I don't think.
it's
about
not
our
us
vision.
individually. I agree. I think we are here as a representative of the community to come up what the community wants in the park.
Yeah.
It was never my idea that I'm part of this steering committee to have the park be what I want it to be.
But then do you want to have that be the agenda for the October 18th meeting?
Or September 20th. I mean, we,
Or, yeah,
for this group to keep time and attention, like 2 agenda items is gonna be
Yeah, I think.
more than
those are-
enough.
Yeah,
So
those are
we
questions you
have
can
to-
take a while to talk
Right.
about too, so.
Well, yeah, the September 20th meeting, the survey will be out.
But we won't have all that.
But yeah, we won't have.
Closed. I really think it's probably,
I think it's 1.4. You get through,
Yeah.
I mean, you get through these
That's the
survey, focus group, public meeting. Now we have a lot of data to react to in terms of visioning for the
And
system.
then that would be inputted to October.
I'd say it's October.
It's after this
Is it
first.
the end
Do
of
we not
this
need a meeting
meeting?
September?
I don't think you do. I mean,
I mean, we're kind of in between that,
Yeah.
that last event, last call and the end of the survey.
I think it's a situation, let's put it on the calendar, we can always get rid of it, much easier than, conversely, putting it back on.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm all for not having it if we don't need it, certainly.
And also you can't be here, right? It's the beginning of September. Can no months?
I'll talk,
Okay.
I'll figure something.
Okay.
So we're saying the October meeting would be our meeting after we've collected all the other input?
Yeah, because the survey would be closed by then.
Yeah. So, and that's October what?
18th.
18th, thank you.
and we want the public meeting before the steering committee meeting too.
It should be the steering committee meeting after the focus groups and public meeting.
Yes.
That could
Well,
be
then we
November.
will need to meet on the 20th to go over what the public
Public.
input meeting schedule and things would look like.
Okay.
That, so that could be our September 20th meeting is the public input.
Really, any time in between then and now.
Oh, we can get in October,
this
like
Friends meeting,
what we're gonna do for that
doesn't matter.
meeting. and
Okay.
goals.
Yeah, we said public input and we also said already for the September 20th, there would be the game plan for the focus groups.
Somebody will make the agenda.
No.
I think the way to. The surveys.
Sure, yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever you're meeting.
Reading this?
Do we have a plan for the next couple of months here? Because we're almost at 7.
Oh, that's what we were just.
I have one more, sorry, I have one more question that besides the interviews, I appreciate slogging through that, and that is communications, because I know that, you know, Jake was just talking about stuff that was up on the website, I'm assuming meaning the city's website. And I just think it's going to be really important for the steering committee and for the partnership generally to make sure that the Friends, I mean, I assume that it's probably important for the public to be able to go to one spot. Maybe it's okay for them to go to 2 spots, but I'm just a little bit concerned that if the 2 websites aren't on the same page around access to surveys or focus group information or community engagement information or all of the above, the process, that it's going to be confusing for the public. And I know that that's something that is concerning to everybody.
I think it should only be on the city.
Jake has some thoughts about that. Yeah, right, Jake?
Yes, so right now we have information on San Damiano under the steering committee, which has a lot of documents. The Landmarks Commission page actually has a lot of information regarding San Damiano. It's references to San Damiano Friary. And then on the Parks page, we have a San Damiano property page, which is fairly vanilla. We're going to compress those into one page on the city website. And within that page have a master plan, you know, subset page, but it'll just be one link so you can go right to that. And then the committee meeting page will reference like the rest of our committees, which are mainly just agendas and minutes and links to YouTube video, you know, the meetings, but we will get that condensed into one page on the city website. And then that'll be kind of the clearinghouse moving forward. Links from the home page. And we can then
That works really well.
Yeah.
Just have the links to like each of the different places. And
Yeah.
It's all in one place.
Yep.
I think it's-
And we can have a link to the Friends page too from there.
Yeah, so that is our goal over the next 2 weeks from the city end, is to kind of merge a lot of that information and get it. I mean, there is a lot of historical information and the, timeline. We just have to sift through what makes the best sense and get it into one
And
spot.
I'm sure some of it's redundant too.
Correct.
One of the pieces I remember from the interview was the web portal and how great of an engagement tool that
The
was.
story map.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that would link from this page as well.
Mhm. So we can start the story map, and typically what we do at this level is put the site plan on the map and then photographs, and it, because these things have GPSs in them, it automatically loads them where you take the pictures. And it could be the same thing for the house. We can include pictures of the inside of the house and get the story map going. And it's a thing that's open 24 hours a day. You just go to the website, the city website, click on that link and it's there. And so it keeps people up to date with what's going on. And so as we work through the project, we'll work with Jake on what is a good time to start putting certain material up on it. When we get past just this initial, site pictures and stuff, we might get into the survey or a link to a survey or something about the survey, or we might talk about, we can put the schedule on it now because we've got a pretty good schedule or we're sticking to it, and we can elaborate on it or we keep it pretty simple. So there's a lot of things that we can do with it, but we will want to go through Jay to make sure that it's time appropriate. The information that we're sharing.
Did we get photos and a Matterport and a video and everything of the homes?
Yes, we just got it like 2 days ago.
Okay.
So we're gonna put that up too. Yeah, it's really kind of fun.
Yeah.
And those actually could go in the story.
Yeah.
So that instead of having to go to a whole bunch of different documents, you can go to a tab in the story map that says like house or something.
And it's
So,
real, it's user friendly. It's just pictures and but you just click stuff. And so it's really good
Right.
for the general public.
Yeah, it's very cool.
so I guess I'm just wondering, as it relates to what Jake was relaying to collapsing everything into one area on the city's website. I guess I'm just wondering from a friend's standpoint, Wes, Andy, Kyla, I'm wondering how you envision the Friends site interfacing. I mean, I just want to make sure that, again, we're seamless there in terms of messaging. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I don't know where I land on this either, but I mean, one, it's a unified message that we need to make sure is consistent on both websites. Because the Friends one gets about 2,500 to 3,000 visits in the last 2 weeks or so. We've gotten that. So I think we have high traffic, high visibility. It's more user friendly in my perspective. And then, so anyway, I guess my point is that's something that we're gonna have to discuss because I think we have a lot of traffic there and how do we interface that with the city's website? I think there's somewhat of two different missions, like fundraising arm compared to like decision-making, et cetera. But if we just go to the city, we're gonna really have to adapt that and then get that fundraising piece over there so that it comes back to the Friends. But I mean, I think that's a conversation that needs to happen because we get a lot of traffic. And I don't know what the city's webpage is.
Do you get, I'd be interested in knowing what your traffic was a month ago. I mean, is it mainly related to the beer garden the last 2 weeks?
No,
do you
we've
think,
been
or
in
is that typical?
3,000s for a while.
I mean, we can certainly link
So,
both ways, right?
Well, it's that Google Analytics.
yeah.
Well, and the story map, because it's just a link, so that could go on the Friends.
Sure.
And actually with the way, because it's ArcView, if somebody were to type in their computer, whatever we title it, master plan, they'll see it, they'll come up and they'll click right, they can click on it. They don't have to go through the city or the Friends.
Maybe this is another discussion that has to happen.
I don't know if this is a discussion that everybody needs to.
Right.
No, yeah.
Get the right people to hammer this out, but like, it's gotta be simple, easy from a public
Yeah.
perspective. Also, the newsletter is produced by the Friends, so how do we make sure all these people that were driving one direction have the opportunity to sign up for that? That's how we're gonna build constituency over the next 18 months. And then the other piece is we've got, what, 17 social media pages and platforms or whatever. Like, how do we get one content generator that gets the same, we just share the same thing through all these channels? That's the other thing. So I don't know.
IT. Whoever's in charge of IT.
It's never perfect. It's not pretty. We just
No, I
as
didn't.
best as we can.
And I don't think there's a simple solution, but like, we need to talk about that,
Right.
the signage on the property, different things like that.
But that's part of the purpose of collapsing all the city stuff
Yeah,
into
that's
one.
great.
Sure, yeah.
I think the one thing I'd like to add for the next meeting is, and I'm the scheduler, and I'd like to, if we're talking about doing public input number 1 before our October 18th meeting, we need to probably decide that at our next meeting on what that date would be, because I may offer that October 18th meeting is the public input meeting, because it's right after the fall festival. And we'd have a lot of engagement if that's agreeable to the group, and then the November meeting would be project goals and vision.
Where have your best public meetings been? Have they been in the park out here or in?
Community center, yeah, generally. I mean, this one will generate significant interest, so we may have to look at location that can seat that many.
Yeah, we.
School, yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put the request in for that date and see.
Because that bigger venue is gonna be harder to get right now.
What's that?
The bigger venue is gonna be harder to get, so time's good.
Are we okay with that?
With the high school?
The October 18th is
Let me
to,
check
that is via public
Marcus.
input number
We have
1.
budget dates set in October. I can't remember. Let me check there.
So Jake, you're saying October 18th would be public input number 1, and then November would be our session?
Yes, November 15th.
And we would have a meeting, we would combine the public information meeting with a meeting of this committee. Is that what you said?
I think in lieu of having a meeting with this committee,
So we can go.
if there's nothing actionable, we would just have the public input meeting on that date.
We need to probably start it a little later than 5.
Correct.
Yeah.
It'd be like a 6:30, 6 or
6:30
6:30
I think at the earliest 6:30.
to 11. Reality. It'll just be-
I remember the dog park meetings.
That was, those, yeah.
Oh,
I believe it's a little bit bigger than that.
Does it make sense to do the rotating presentation? Something like that. So like we've done it sometimes when we got people going through and they only can make a certain time frame. I mean, it could be 6 to 8 and we do a presentation at 6, answer people's questions. We do another presentation at 7, answer people's questions, and they can come and they can come
That's a good
at
idea.
that point.
Yeah.
I mean, try to put it in a 2-hour window, but allow them 2 chances to hear the presentation of where we're at and
there's
the parameters, the guardrails, right? And
Yeah.
all that fun stuff,
There's an
right?
actual break.
Yeah.
yeah, I think we've done that on some road projects, or
Yeah.
engineers do it. So that if you come, an hour into it, you didn't miss
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is that, with anything else or?
So could we just, Jake, could you just real quickly, just to make sure we're on the same page? Since we keep, so August 16th, I have is drafted, we're gonna focus on the survey and who the focus groups are gonna be, right?
Yep.
And then October, it's gonna be, that's August. September, it's gonna be the game plan for the focus groups and for the public input session. Right?
Correct.
And then October, it would be the actual public input session, and then November would be our session.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's phase 1. So it gets us to phase 1.
That should get us through phase 1.
Easy.
Let's do it. That was painful, but it actually was good to do. We got everything. Yeah.
I'm good. So Thanksgiving.
So are we all good? Anything else? No?
It's on the agenda.
Well, the agenda is to adjourn.
Very.
Yes. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. I assume no one's voting no.
I'm gonna wait to hear it.
Thank you, everybody. Sorry I can't be there in
Thanks,
person.
Nancy.
Yeah, I think-